The first thing Princess Saralith of the Aurelian Concord noticed about the human was how small he looked inside the docking bay. Not short. Aurelians were taller than most species, but narrow, light-boned, soft-looking. Wrapped in a plain gray jacket with no insignia, no visible weapons, and no ceremonial markings that would suggest rank or importance. He stood beside a cargo crate, hands in his pockets, watching the arrival procession with the detached interest of someone waiting for a late shuttle. This was the being the Trade Council had assigned as her liaison escort for the journey through the Rim. Saralith's crests twitched in irritation. Her own honor guard, 4 towering Karvak knights in ceremonial armor, stood behind her, their polearms humming with restrained energy. Their chitinous frames were built for war, their presence alone enough to make most station personnel clear a respectful path. And yet, the Concord had decided that a single human was sufficient additional security. A human. She had studied the species, of course. Every royal heir did. Humans came from a so-called death world, a planet with unstable climates, aggressive fauna, tectonic violence, and a biosphere that seemed actively hostile to intelligent life. On paper, that should have made them formidable. In practice, most galactic species agreed on a different assessment. Humans were reckless, fragile, and relied far too much on tools and machines to survive. This one didn't even look particularly armed. "Is that him?" Saralith asked her chief knight, Commander Threx. Threx's mandibles clicked. Designation: Marcus Hale. Human. Civilian contractor attached to the Interstellar Mediation Corps. Records indicate prior service in multiple frontier conflicts. "He looks like a cargo clerk," Saralith said flatly. As if sensing her gaze, the human looked up. His eyes, forward-facing, unsettlingly focused, met hers across the bay. He didn't bow, didn't avert his gaze. He just gave a small, polite nod, as if greeting a colleague rather than a princess of a multi-system empire. Then he walked over. "Princess Saralith," he said, voice calm, accented in that oddly rounded human way. "Marcus Hale. I'll be accompanying you to the Lithary Summit. Pleasure to meet you." He offered his hand. Saralith stared at it. Threx shifted, armor plate scraping. "You will address her as your Radiance," the commander growled. Marcus didn't flinch. He simply withdrew his hand and inclined his head slightly. "My apologies." "Your Radiance." The apology sounded sincere. Still, Saralith felt a spark of irritation. "You're my escort?" she asked. "Yes, ma'am." "You are unarmed." "I wouldn't say that," Marcus replied mildly. "Just not visibly." Threx snorted. "Your kind carries projectile toys. They will not stop a blade plasma strike." Marcus's lips twitched in what might have been a smile. "Let's hope we don't need to find out." Saralith turned away. "Very well. Try to keep up." The journey began uneventfully, which only deepened Saralith's sense that this assignment was a political insult rather than a serious security measure. They traveled aboard the Concordant Spear, a diplomatic cruiser designed more for comfort and symbolism than battle. The Karvak Guard maintained their rigid watch rotations. Saralith reviewed summit briefings. And Marcus existed. He walked the corridors quietly. He ate in the crew commons rather than the royal dining chamber. He spent long hours in the observation deck, staring out at hyperspace like someone listening to a story only he could hear. Once, Saralith caught him in the training bay, practicing with a simple weighted bar instead of any advanced weapon. His movements were precise but unremarkable. No glowing energy fields, no gravity-assisted strikes, no combat drones. "You're supposed to be my protector," she said from the doorway. He paused and set the bar down. "That's the job, yeah." "You do not train with proper weapons." "I train with what I have," he said. And with what works? She studied him, crests folding slightly. You are not what I expected from a Deathworlder. That makes two of us, he said, and returned to his exercises. Her opinion did not improve. 3 days from the Lithary system, the Concordant sphere entered a narrow transit corridor, a region of space infamous for pirate activity and political accidents. Threx had argued for a longer, safer route. The Concord's diplomats had insisted on speed. Seralith was in her quarters when the first impact hit. The ship shuddered. Alarms wailed. The lights flickered from gold to emergency crimson. Report, she snapped as Threx burst in. Ambush, he said. Multiple hostile vessels. Energy nets on our drives. They are boarding. Before she could respond, the deck trembled again. Closer this time. The sound of cutting torches echoed through the hull. Marcus appeared in the doorway behind Threx, already pulling on a compact armored vest that hadn't been visible under his jacket. How many? He asked. Too many, Threx replied. Your presence here is unnecessary, human. Stay with the princess and do not interfere. Marcus's eyes flicked to Seralith. With respect, Commander, interference is kind of my job. The first breach came in the forward corridor. The attackers weren't simple pirates. Their armor bore no insignia, their weapons were military grade, and their movements were disciplined. Mercenaries. Or worse, deniable assets. The Karvak guard met them head-on. Seralith watched from behind a force field barrier as plasma and blade energy lit the corridor in violent flashes. Her guards fought like legends, their towering forms a wall of chitin and steel. And still, the attackers kept coming. A shockwave rocked the deck. The barrier flickered. Secondary breach. Threx barked over comms. They are flanking. Seralith felt a cold, unfamiliar knot of fear tighten in her core. Marcus stepped forward. Princess, he said quietly, if things go bad, I'm getting you out through maintenance shaft C7. It leads to an escape pod cluster. Threx turned on him. You will not move her without my... The corridor exploded. The force field failed. Debris and smoke filled the air. 2 attackers came through the smoke, weapons raised. One of them didn't even see Marcus move. He was suddenly there, inside the attacker's reach, one hand snapping up to deflect the weapon, the other driving forward in a short, brutal strike that crushed the mercenary's throat armor inward. The second attacker fired. Marcus twisted, the shot grazing his shoulder, and then he was behind them, using their own momentum to throw them into the bulkhead with a bone-shaking impact. They didn't get up. Seralith stared. That wasn't refined. It wasn't elegant. It was fast, efficient, and terrifyingly decisive. More attackers poured in. Move, Marcus shouted. He grabbed a fallen rifle, not to use it, but to hurl it into one attacker's face. He ducked under a blade swipe, slammed an elbow into a joint seam, and tore the weapon free with a grunt of effort. Threx and the remaining guards formed a defensive ring, but they were being pushed back. The attackers were targeting Seralith. Specifically, extraction team confirmed, came a distorted voice over the attackers' comms. Primary asset, the princess. Eliminate resistance. So that was it. Not pirates. A kidnapping. Seralith's heart pounded. Marcus moved to her side. Time to go. Now. He didn't wait for permission. He grabbed her arm, not roughly but firmly, and pulled her toward the side corridor. Threx roared in protest, but another explosion cut him off. They ran. The ship shook as more sections were breached. Emergency bulkheads slammed down, cutting off corridors behind them. Smoke burned Seralith's lungs. She stumbled once. Marcus caught her without breaking stride. You are wounded, she said, noticing the dark stains spreading on his shoulder.
Later, he said.
Focus. They reached the maintenance shaft just as a squad of attackers rounded the corner. Marcus turned, shoved Sarilith behind him, and raised the captured blade weapon. "Stay behind me," he said. "You cannot hold them alone," she protested. He glanced back at her, eyes steady. "Watch me try." The fight that followed burned itself into Sarilith's memory. Marcus didn't fight like a Karvak knight or a trained energy blade duelist. He fought like gravity itself was on his side, using the narrow corridor, the low ceiling, the clutter of maintenance equipment. He used walls, doors, even fallen bodies as weapons and cover. A blade caught his side. He barely reacted, except to grab the attacker and drive them headfirst into a junction box hard enough to shatter it. A plasma bolt scorched his leg. He limped for half a step, then kept moving. He was bleeding. He was outnumbered. And he was not backing up. Finally, he slammed the shaft controls and shoved Sarilith inside.
"Climb."
"I'll cover." She hesitated. "You will die." He gave a breathless half-smile. "Not today." The hatch closed just as another explosion rocked the corridor. Sarilith climbed. They didn't reach the escape pods. The attackers anticipated that route. A containment field snapped into place in the access junction, trapping them in a narrow service hub. Marcus slumped against the wall, breathing hard, blood soaking through his vest. Sarilith turned to him, panic breaking through her royal composure. "You are dying." "Not ideal," he admitted. "But we're not done yet." The attackers' voices echoed from both corridors. "You cannot fight anymore," she said. He pushed himself upright anyway. "Don't really have a choice." Sarilith looked at him, really looked at him for the first time. This wasn't a weak being. This was a Deathworld survivor. A creature that came from a place where nature itself tried to kill you every day, and sometimes succeeded. She stepped forward, placing herself beside him. "What are you doing?" he asked. "I am not leaving you," she said. "If they take me, your sacrifice is meaningless." He studied her for a heartbeat, then nodded. "All right, your radiance. Let's make it expensive for them."
They did.
When Threx and the remaining guards finally broke through to the hub, they found the attackers either dead or unconscious, the containment field shattered, and Marcus sitting on the floor, back against the wall, barely conscious. Sarilith was kneeling beside him, her hands stained with his blood, as she tried to slow the bleeding with torn fabric from her ceremonial sash. Threx stared in disbelief. "He defended me," she said simply. "Alone." The summit was delayed. Investigations followed. Political accusations were quietly buried under layers of diplomacy. Marcus spent 2 weeks in a med bay. When he finally woke, he found Princess Sarilith sitting in a chair beside his bed, her crests folded in a posture of formal respect. "You are difficult to kill," she said. "Working on it," he replied weakly. She inclined her head. "I misjudged you. I believed strength was measured only in size, armor, and weapons." "And now?" he asked. "Now I know better," she said. "On my world, legends are written about warriors who stand when they should fall, about guardians who choose duty over survival." She met his eyes. "They will speak of you, the human who did not yield." He blinked. "Catchy." A faint, very unroyal smile touched her face. "And Marcus," she added, "the Concord will not forget its debt to you." He closed his eyes, exhausted but alive. "Just doing the job, your radiance." But across the stars, in quiet reports and whispered stories, a new phrase began to circulate among diplomats, mercenaries, and frontier soldiers alike. If you want to take something from the galaxy, pray a human isn't standing in the way. Because sometimes the weakest-looking species comes from the deadliest world of all. Marcus Hale spent another 6 days in the med bay, drifting in and out of drug sleep, while the ship's autosurgeons argued with his biology. The machines did not like humans. Aurelian medical systems were designed for species with redundant organs, slower metabolisms, and blood that did not insist on clotting at the worst possible moments. Marcus's body, on the other hand, healed with stubborn aggression, feverish, painful, and messy. Twice, the med systems flagged him as medically non-compliant, simply because his heart rate refused to behave like a sensible alien's. When he finally woke for good, the first thing he noticed was the quiet. No alarms. No distant thumps of repair crews. Just the low, steady hum of the ship cruising through stable space. The second thing he noticed was Princess Seralith sitting beside his bed. She wasn't wearing her formal regalia this time. No ceremonial light weave. No jeweled crest bands. Just a simple traveling robe in deep silver blue. It made her look smaller. More real. "You're awake," she said. "Been awake before," Marcus croaked. Didn't stick. Her crests, tilted in what he'd learned, was an Aurelian expression somewhere between relief and restrained amusement. "The physicians assure me you are now statistically unlikely to die." High praise. She stood and performed a formal Aurelian bow, slow, precise, and meant for heads of state or legendary generals. Marcus tried to sit up.
Failed.
Your Radiance, you don't have to." "I do," she said firmly. "You stood between me and death when you had every logical reason to run. Among my people, that creates a bond of honor that cannot be ignored." She met his eyes. "You were assigned to me as an escort. You became something more." He looked away, uncomfortable. "Just did what needed doing." "That," she said softly, "is what all legends say about themselves." The truth came out 3 days later. The attackers were not pirates. Not even mercenaries in the usual sense. They were deniable assets tied to a minor power block that feared what Seralith represented. A future empress who favored cooperation over conquest, trade over intimidation, stability over necessary wars. If they couldn't control her, they had planned to remove her. Quietly. The scandal, when it broke, shook half the Concord. But scandals fade. Stories don't. Footage from the Concordant spear leaked in fragments, security cam angles, broken audio. Half-glimpsed moments of a human in a torn vest standing in a corridor that was too narrow, too full of smoke, too full of enemies. The phrase Deathworlder started appearing in headlines again. Not as an insult. As a warning. When the ship finally reached Aurelian space, a ceremonial delegation waited in orbit. Gold and white cruisers. Honor guards. Broadcast drones. The kind of arrival that turned a political incident into a public narrative. Marcus watched it from a viewport, arms folded carefully to avoid pulling at still healing scars. "Looks like you're home," he said. Seralith stood beside him.
Yes.
"And you will be leaving us." "Guess so. My contract's with the Mediation Corps, not the Royal Court." She was quiet for a moment. "My mother, the Empress, has reviewed the reports," she said. "She wished me to tell you this personally." Seralith turned to face him fully. The Aurelian Concord formally recognizes Marcus Hale of Earth as a defender of the crown. You will be granted safe passage in all Concord systems, and any who raise arms against you will answer to us. Marcus blinked. "That sounds expensive." "It is," she said. "And it is deserved." She hesitated, then added more quietly, "I misjudged you. I thought strength was something you could see, measure,
display."
He shrugged. "Most people do." "My world is not a death world," she said. "Ours is a world of controlled climates, engineered ecosystems, calculated risks. We forgot what it means to grow up where survival is not guaranteed." Her crests lifted slightly. You reminded me. They parted on the hangar deck. No speeches. No crowds. Just a quiet moment before his shuttle launched. Take care of yourself, your radiance, Marcus said. And you, Deathworlder, she replied, using the word not as a title, but as an honor. As his shuttle pulled away, Sarilith watched until it vanished into the light of the docking corridor. Then she turned back toward her people, her future, and the throne she would one day claim. And she carried with her a new understanding. Empires were not protected by size, nor by fleets, nor by titles. Sometimes they were protected by a single stubborn human who refused to move. Years later, among soldiers, traders, and diplomats, a quiet saying spread across the outer systems. If you think someone is weak, make sure they're not from a death world. Because the galaxy learned something it would never forget. When a human decides to stand in your way, even destiny has to go around them.